The Sacramento sun beat down on the pavement on a crisp December morning in 1986. A group of senior auditors dressed in immaculate charcoal suits stepped out of their sedans. They represented Ernst and Winnie, one of the most prestigious accounting firms on the planet. They were there to inspect a massive, multi-million-dollar building restoration project. A job that supposedly proved their client was the fastest-growing carpet cleaning and restoration empire in America. As they approached the building, everything looked exactly as it should. There were security guards standing watch, workmen carrying ladders, and the loud, echoing sounds of construction reflecting off the concrete walls. On the front doors, professional signs bore the company's name. The young, charismatic chief executive officer led the tour himself, confidently pointing out the water damage restoration progress, cracking jokes, and answering complex operational questions without a moment's hesitation. The auditors took notes, shook hands, and left completely satisfied. They had no idea that the signs on the door had been taped up just 2 hours prior. They did not know that the security guard had been paid thousands of dollars to stand there and play a part, or that the workmen were hired actors carrying empty boxes. The entire building belonged to someone else entirely, and the young CEO had bribed a building manager to gain access for just a single afternoon. The multi-million-dollar restoration contract did not exist. The company's skyrocketing revenue was an illusion, and the boy wonder leading the tour was barely 20 years old. But to understand how a teenager managed to construct a financial mirage, that fooled some of the sharpest minds on Wall Street. We have to go back to a dusty garage in Reseda, California in 1982. In the early 1980s, the San Fernando Valley was a landscape of suburban sprawl, strip malls, and burning California sun. In the midst of this lived Barry Minkow. He was 15 years old, highly athletic, relentlessly ambitious, and possessed a level of verbal charm that bypassed the normal skepticism of adults. Barry did not want to wait for success. He wanted it immediately. With a single second-hand carpet cleaning machine, some cheap chemicals, and a desk set up in his parents' garage, he launched ZZZZ Best Carpet Cleaning. The name was chosen for a simple, practical reason: to ensure his business would appear last in the local yellow pages. A quirky branding choice that Barry claimed made it memorable. To the local community and the regional press, Barry was the ultimate embodiment of the American dream. He was a teenage entrepreneur waking up at 4:00 a.m. to clean carpets before heading to high school, then returning to the office to run his growing business until midnight. He joined a local gym, bulked up, and began cultivating an image of a clean-cut, high-achieving prodigy. Local news stations ran feature segments on him. He was the kid who was going to make it. But behind the television interviews and the polished smile, the business was structurally hollow. Carpet cleaning is a low-margin, highly competitive service. Barry quickly discovered that the revenue from actually cleaning carpets could not support the lifestyle he wanted, nor could it cover the basic operational costs of the business. Paychecks for his employees began to bounce. Suppliers demanded cash on delivery. Faced with his first major cash flow crisis, Barry did not scale back. Instead, he discovered how easy it was to manipulate the systems around him. He began with minor infractions. He staged a break-in at his own shop, reporting stolen equipment to collect insurance payouts. When that money ran out, he stole his mother's jewelry and pawned it, claiming it had been lost. He realized that banks and insurance companies rarely did deep physical inspections for small claims and minor loans. They relied on paperwork, signatures, and the sheer confidence of the person presenting them. He also turned to check kiting. By opening accounts at multiple banks, Barry would write a check from Bank A to deposit into Bank B, exploiting the several days of float it took for the banks to clear the funds. For a brief window of time, the same pool of non-existent money appeared on the books of both institutions. It was a delicate, stressful high-wire act. Barry was constantly running from bank to bank, shuffling paper to outrun the clearing process. He knew that this frantic cycle of petty crime and financial stalling could not last forever. To survive, he needed a bigger story. He needed a way to explain why a teenage carpet cleaner suddenly had access to millions of dollars. The transition from a struggling local business to a financial juggernaut began when Bari met an insurance claims adjuster named Tom Paget. Paget understood the inner workings of the insurance industry, specifically how insurance companies paid out massive claims for property restoration after fires or floods. Together, they engineered a scheme of staggering audacity. Bari announced that ZZZZ Best was expanding into the high-value sector of insurance restoration. If a major commercial building suffered severe water damage, ZZZZ Best would step in, dry out the structure, replace the drywall, and restore the property to its original state. These were multi-million-dollar contracts, far more lucrative than steam-cleaning residential living rooms. To secure loans from banks to fund these massive projects, Bari needed proof of the contracts. He didn't have them, so he simply manufactured them. He and Paget created a shell company called Interstate Appraisal Service. When a bank, an investor, or an auditor wanted to verify that ZZZZ Best had indeed been hired to perform a multi-million-dollar restoration project, they were given a phone number for interstate appraisal. When the call came in, Tom Paget would pick up the phone. Operating out of a small, nondescript office, Paget would adopt a highly professional tone, confirming in precise detail that the contract was real, the work was underway, and that ZZZZ Best was doing an exemplary job. To back up the phone calls, Bari generated mountains of paperwork. He bought typewriters, aged paper, and forged the signatures of real insurance executives. He created fake invoices, fake progress reports, and fake bank deposit slips. The banks seeing a seemingly legitimate paper trail and receiving vocal confirmation from an independent appraisal service, readily handed over millions of dollars in loans. Bari used the newly acquired funds to pay off his older debts and fuel his increasingly lavish lifestyle. But a private company can only borrow so much. To reach the upper echelons of American wealth, Bari wanted to take ZZZZ Best public. In 1986, ZZZZ Best launched its initial public offering on Wall Street. By this point, Bari's charm was operating at maximum capacity. He hired top-tier underwriters, prestigious law firms, and Ernst & Whinney as his auditors. The involvement of these highly respected institutions gave ZZZZ Best an aura of absolute legitimacy. Wall Street investment bankers, eager to find the next corporate superstar, fell in love with the story of the 20-year-old CEO who was revolutionizing the service industry. The stock price climbed rapidly. At its peak, ZZZZ Best was valued at over $200 million. Bari's personal net worth on paper soared into the tens of millions. He bought a mansion in an exclusive gated community, drove a red Ferrari, and poured money into high-profile advertising campaigns, even appearing in commercials, warning consumers to watch out for dishonest carpet cleaners. He was celebrated as a financial genius, a teenage tycoon who had conquered Wall Street, using little more than hard work and a vacuum cleaner. But the entire corporate structure was a ticking bomb. Nearly 86% of the company's reported revenue was completely fabricated. The business of ZZZZ Best was not cleaning carpets or restoring buildings. Its real business was the manufacturing of convincing paperwork. Act 3: The Crack in the Glass. By late 1986, the pressure of maintaining the illusion was beginning to take a physical toll on Bari. The cash requirements of the fraud were growing exponentially. To keep the stock price up and pay the interest on his massive debts, he had to continuously invent larger and more complex restoration projects. Then the auditors at Ernst & Whinney threw a wrench into the machinery. As part of their annual audit of a public company, they informed Bari that they could no longer rely solely on phone confirmations and paper invoices. They needed to physically inspect one of ZZZZ Best's largest active restoration jobs, a $7 million project in Sacramento. The project, of course, did not exist. Bari did not panic. Instead, he mobilized his team for an operation that resembled a Hollywood heist. He dispatched an associate to Sacramento to find an unfinished commercial office building. Through a combination of fast-talking and a substantial cash bribe to a building security guard, they secured access to the site for one weekend. They spent thousands of dollars dressing the set. They hung ZZZZ Best signs, placed work orders on clipboards, and hired local laborers to mill about the halls looking busy. When the auditors arrived, Bari performed the walkthrough with absolute poise. He controlled the pace of the tour, pointing out specific structural challenges they had supposedly overcome, while steering the auditors away from areas of the building that were obviously untouched. The deception worked. The auditors signed off on the financial statements. The stock continued to rise. Bari had pulled off the impossible. But the downfall of ZZZZ Best did not begin with a sophisticated Wall Street analysis or a federal investigation. It began with a minor local dispute. In May 1987, an investigative reporter for the Los Angeles Times named Al Delugach published a seemingly routine article. The story did not focus on multi-million-dollar financial fraud. Instead, it detailed how ZZZZ Best had systematically overcharged several residential customers on their credit cards years earlier, and how the company had aggressively fought those customers when they tried to get their money back. To the public, it seemed like a minor customer service issue. But to the financial community, it was a sudden, jarring contradiction. Why would a company supposedly worth over $200 million, with millions in cash reserves, be engaging in petty credit card disputes with suburban housewives? The article acted as a catalyst. Short sellers, investors who bet that a company's stock will fall, began to look closely at ZZZZ Best's financial filings. They noticed strange discrepancies. The company claimed to be doing massive multi-million-dollar restoration jobs. Yet there were no public records of building permits. No local news reports of major fires or floods at those locations, and no subcontractors claiming they had worked on the sites. The skepticism spread. Ernst & Winnie, sensing danger, demanded that Bari provide immediate, unhindered access to the documentation for all active restoration sites. They wanted to see the original contracts, the bank records, and the physical properties without any prior notice. Bari tried to stall. He claimed the documents were confidential or that the clients insisted on privacy. But the auditors refused to back down. Realizing the game was reaching its end, Ernst & Winnie resigned as ZZZZ Best auditors. The resignation of a major accounting firm is a massive red flag on Wall Street. The stock price began to plummet. Within days, the ZZZZ Best board of directors launched an internal investigation. They hired private detectives to visit the address of a major restoration project in San Diego. When the investigators arrived, they found a vacant lot. The illusion had shattered. On July 2, 1987, Bari Minkow resigned from the company he had built, citing health problems. A few days later, ZZZZ Best filed for bankruptcy protection. The stock, which had been worth hundreds of millions of dollars just weeks prior, was now entirely worthless. The federal investigation that followed was swift and devastating. Investigators poured through the warehouses of files left behind by ZZZZ Best, quickly realizing that the vast majority of the company's business was a complete fiction. In 1988, Bari Minkow went on trial. He was convicted on 57 felony counts, including securities fraud, bank fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The judge sentenced the 22-year-old to 25 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $26 million in restitution. The financial damage was widespread. Thousands of everyday retail investors who had bought into the story of the teenage prodigy saw their savings wiped out. The prestigious banks that had loaned money based on forged invoices were left holding empty accounts. The reputation of the financial institutions involved was severely tarnished, highlighting a glaring vulnerability in the way Wall Street conducted due diligence. But the psychological legacy of Bari Minkow was perhaps the most enduring aspect of the entire case. After serving over 7 years in prison, Bari was released. He claimed to have undergone a profound transformation. He became an ordained minister, eventually serving as the pastor of a large church in San Diego. He founded the Fraud Discovery Institute, using his insider knowledge of deception to help corporate clients and law enforcement detect financial crimes. He was invited to speak to business schools and professional associations, lecturing on the dangers of greed and the mechanics of fraud. For a time, it appeared to be a genuine story of redemption. But the pattern of Bari Minkow's life was not so easily broken. In 2011, it was revealed that while acting as a pastor and a fraud investigator, Bari was secretly using his position to manipulate the stock of a major home-building company for his own financial gain. He later pled guilty to insider trading. Subsequent investigations revealed that he had also been systematically embezzling over $3 million from his own church congregation, exploiting the trust of his parishioners just as he had once exploited the trust of Wall Street bankers. He was sent back to federal prison for another decade. The story of ZZZZ best remains a classic case study in the history of financial crime. It demonstrated that the most dangerous vulnerability in any financial system is not a lack of regulations, but the human desire to believe in a compelling story. Wall Street did not verify Bari's business because they did not want the story to be false. They wanted to believe in the teenage genius who could turn a vacuum cleaner into a multi-million-dollar empire. And in their eagerness to participate in that dream, they chose to look past the empty offices, the forged papers, and the quiet warnings. In the end, Bari Minkao's greatest creation was never a carpet-cleaning empire, but a mirror that showed the financial world exactly what it wanted to see.